So this is something that we've been hearing as part of being in the industry, but in the current trends of journalism, there's a lot of expose and finally not being afraid of kind of standing up to these AAA companies. And Naughty Dog just recently in the past month have been in the headlines finally talking about malpractice, crunch culture, and more specifically, Last of Us 2. And one of the biggest quotes that I heard that 70% of people, specifically in the designer department, have left since Uncharted 2, since working on that to working on Last of Us 2. So that's a huge amount of senior staffs and leads that have been constantly changing at that studio. And would love to kind of talk about what your guys' thoughts are on that. So let me kind of go over to Richard here. Design, I never really like to give you guys credit, but you guys do play a big part in games. And once a senior staff or lead staff leaves, there's a lot of figuring out the pipeline again. And it starts with you guys and trickles down to all of us and can cause a lot of delays, which they've always been having issues with. So hearing that, and it's not news to us, but maybe news to a lot of fans. What are your thoughts about this? Same old stuff.
So the idea that like people leaving Naughty Dog and it causing like a huge change. Like, sorry, I wasn't quite sure what the question was there, Brandon. I'm sorry.
Let me kind of go over the details. Yeah. So this is a Kotaku article that was released a couple of weeks ago, actually. But the whole thing was talking about pretty much the crunch code culture there, where developers are, I'm sure you have friends, and we all have friends there, right? Every game, pretty much 9 months out, they're in there from Monday through Saturday. They're working like 60 plus hours, and the only thing they try to make up with it is after a 2-3 year or now 4 or 5 year game cycle, they give their workers like 2 months off to kind of try to make up with that. But the biggest thing is that every, I would say, summer, you would see a huge listing of pretty much every position for contract work every year, right? So for the layman, they would be thinking, oh man, Naughty Dog is growing, but mostly it's just replenishing burnout people. So that's where we're at. Kind of want to know your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think crunch culture is healthy. I know, like, we've talked about that several times, and part of, like, ever since we had, like, I think a roundtable like 2 or 3 months ago, or I said, like, part of it is like people wanting to do their good job, so they actually volunteer for crunch and all that. I was completely wrong with that. So when I started reading more into it, actually after it, I started thinking back on my own experiences, like crunching a little bit at Blizzard, but it wasn't like crunching hardcore like this. I mean, I can't even imagine crunching for several years. Even if the game is like super great, like Last of Us or any of the Rockstar games are, like, it's not at all. Yeah, I actually read about that like earlier. The construction worker getting fired because they thought that nobody was in the building when they were working.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So I mean, like,
it's like the rest of the yeah. It's
like
a
lot of
the video.
listeners,
It's like video games like biggest.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, I mean, in their article, it kind of highlights how owners of the buildings on one night, right? Construction workers was working within the building and there was an accident. Basically, something just fell off the ceiling. Normally, well, that is a big problem. But in this case, because of how culture is pretty crazy at Naughty Dog, there were actually people there, but thankfully no one got hurt, right? It's a great way to kind of start off the article. But this whole discussion about this is how they operate, and big game developers are not really hold as liable because they keep pumping out success, and there's a line out the door all the time for these type of game companies because of their prestigious position, and until they just have a miss, man, there's not really anything I don't think Naughty Dog will do. It's just for me at least, right, on a personal level. Again, not reflecting any opinions of you guys. I don't want you guys to be in trouble. But I just want to say that it's just something that I see Naughty Dog being one of the biggest offender, and everyone kind of hold them in the highest regard from both fans and game developers. And they're just, we're probably permitting them to continue to kind of have this type of practice. And they're supposed to be a leader in the industry, right?
Well, I think there's a quote in the article actually that says they've never seen success any other way.
Yes.
So they don't believe there's another way of achieving it, right? And so that's that, right? And so as long as they make good games that are high quality, and then gamers and everybody else picks them up and says, "I can't wait to play that next Last of Us or that next Uncharted," nothing's going to change around this at all. And then also it's funny, like in this whole COVID-19 era too, I saw there's a satire video game website there was a link from that going around where the headline was not, in the midst of COVID-19, Naughty Dog is permitting its developers to sleep at home. Right. And
is this like the video game?
Yeah, it's like Hard Times or whatever it was. I can't remember which one it was, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was funny. Like it's funny, but it's also funny because it's also like, yeah, to see something like that actually happening, right? So yeah, like, you know, it is what it is, right? Like, yeah, they just don't know how to succeed any other way. And the games come out and are great. And so they're like, yeah, that's the way you have to do it. And it's not the first time I've heard from people in the industry, not just Naughty Dog. I hear this a lot. The way to get quality is to sit here and work and iterate and get the quality no matter what the cost. Right. And then they justify it because then the game is successful. They make a lot of money. The bonuses come through. All right, let's do it again. Right.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is.
Mm-hmm. And just to correct what I was saying.
Yeah. If anything, Brandon, the main thing that I want to say is, like, I think crunch culture is definitely a thing in video game development. I think certain studios do it a lot more than others. I think certain countries do it a lot more than others. Like, you know, working at working with Tencent, like they don't mind me if I send my design docs on Friday evening because they're still working on Saturday, or like in different industries, even like
let's not even talk about China. Like it's bananas in China. The amount of crunch.
Yeah,
they're already back at work.
Yeah. And then even like when you think about like Hollywood, like what's that studio that like messed up on Sonic, and then they had to do all the reshoots for it, redo all of his character modeling, and then as soon as they were done, they just like closed the studio just like that. I mean, that's just like extra brutal. I don't even know how. Like, there's no bonuses there for anybody. It's like, it's not like, at least like, you know, you work at Naughty Dog, you crunch like hell, you know, you slowly move up the corporate ladder, you get a lot bigger bonuses. But like in Hollywood, like, man, you just I don't even know how you describe, like, how much money did like all of the Marvel, like the MCU movies make, and then look at the credits afterwards. It's like, you know, thousands of people, and you have no idea what kind of working conditions they are. So I think it's the same perception that people have of video games. It's like, fuck yeah, Last of Us 2, but then you don't really think about how it was made. Like, nobody wants to know how the sausage is made, man.
Although I think the main difference between video games and movies, though, is you go into a movie job. That's the job. The job is to work on that film, right? And you are by default a contractor, right? Where in the video game industry, a lot of folks, you know, it's a full-time job. You know, you're just at that studio, and every year for 3-4 years, you know, you're just going to be crunching and killing yourself, right? And then layoffs happen if the game doesn't do well, and you're like, oh, what happened, right? So it's a little bit different, but yeah, like the work and the crunch is still crazy in both cases, right?
Yeah, and just to kind of circle back to what you were saying for the Sonic reshot. Well, they didn't reshoot anything; they just redid the whole visual effects. It's NPC, moving pictures company. They are a big visual effects company, and they had to close down. It's very similar to Life of Pi, right? As soon as they won the Oscar, they closed down, and it was
just their Vancouver,
right?
Just mind you, it was just their Vancouver studio because, of course, they could do the work cheaper somewhere else.
Of course. So they're still going on. It's just that particular studio that was working on that reshoot, and that well too. It's an unsustainable model. Obviously, a visual effects company should be like a warning sign for game developers. I mean, we can never really compartmentalize all our work for a game in that way. There still needs to be a core team to kind of manage all the moving parts of a game. So thankfully we have that. But trust me, they are trying their best to kind of minimize the core team as much as possible and utilize the outsourcing. Just to kind of close on this topic though, with Naughty Dog, one of the effects I'm hoping that this remote working is going to help with, and I mean, it probably applies to them the most, as Ray was kind of mentioning before. They're not really ever set up for remote working at this huge capacity, and they have this Last of Us 2 and crunching mentality. So kind of like what you guys are talking about, a lot of deadlines will be pushed. Kind of want to see how they react to this. I'll be very surprised if they're going to still march on with their dates. But I would say this. I am glad that I think from the crunch culture to no crunch culture, there's an in-between where we're actually having people crunch at home instead and sleeping in their own beds. So I think we need this essential move right here to kind of ease that concern, right? Just at least have these people, if they're crunching, they're working up till 2 a.m. in their own home. And I take comfort in knowing that a lot of Naughty Dogs are sitting at home right now crunching on Last of Us 2. I'm pretty sure they're still setting up their computers, but
go to sleep. Go to sleep. That's all I have
Please
to say.
go to sleep. Yeah. Sleep.
Yeah. One last thing before I move on to the next subject with this COVID, going back to the first topic, do you think the industry is going to open this up more? Like, let's take Naughty Dog for an example, as we're talking about them. Do you think that they're going to go back to their old ways, or they're going to mix it more with this type of mentality? No? All right, Ray, shaking your head. Go ahead and take it. What do you think?
No, definitely not.
Nah. Yeah, there's no big amount of wisdom that I can impart here, but money's money, the industry's the industry. When we go back to normal, everything will go back to normal. It's sad, but I'm very pessimistic on that. Yeah. Richard,
you feel about the same way that these big companies experiencing this for the next 2-3 months will suddenly just scratch all the IT infrastructure? Let's just go back to working in the office all the time.
I think that the quote in the Kotaku article that said they've not known success any other way just hints just how kind of conservative their thinking is, and how short-term thinking it is. So I think working from home is a model that works for certain types of products. But for something like Last of Us, where you're really handcrafting every single microsecond of it, and then you have all these other game systems, there's just no way. They're gonna put everybody in as soon as COVID goes away. They're just gonna pull everyone back in, or find people that can pull into it that are eager and all that stuff. It's just a vicious cycle.
Video games is highly collaborative and creative, and people need to talk and figure stuff out. You could do Zoom meetings or do some sort of virtual whiteboards or whatever, but we're just not there yet for some of these disciplines, and they just need to be there in the office talking with the creative director or the lead artist or the art director or whatever, right? They need to work together in a collaborative environment. So I don't see that changing that much.
Mm. Well, it was a good try then. Nothing like the pandemic will actually promote this idea, but if anything, it'll help more outside vendors kind of help with these studios into being open to remote working. I don't know. Maybe virtual studios are going to be a result of this on the rise, right?